This is how Ole Miss replaces Quinshon Judkins and makes their national championship run. Yes, I said what I said. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Thank you very much for joining me on this Monday. Today on the show, we tell you how Ole Miss will replace Quinshon Judkins and make their national championship run. And honestly, it isn't as hard as you think. As I mentioned, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers that make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's JASC medical.com. All right, Quinshon Judkins has entered the transfer portal, and he is 99% not coming back to Ole Miss, and that's okay. Everybody knows what my position is on that, and there's social media record and show record and all this about me not wanting to ever pay and overpay for a running back. It just doesn't make sense. It's not a value position. And if you look at Ole Miss last year, they gained 2,600 yards. And they did that on 322 carries, 29 touchdowns. That is what you have to replace. You have to replace 2,600 yards, 322 carries, 29 touchdowns. And if you look at it, half of the carries were to Quinshon Judkins last season. He ran for about 1,200 yards, which was about 40% of the yards rushing, and he gained about half of the touchdowns as well. That is what you have to replace. And I think Ole Miss is going to hit that on two different prongs. Okay. We're going to do that in the first segment and the second segment of today's show, where first of all, we talk about potential transfer portal additions that Ole Miss might go after. And on the second segment, we'll talk about what Ole Miss already had on their roster going into this season. But first of all, let's start with the transfer portal and some players that you probably need to at least pay attention to. Now, I'm not saying these players are going to go to Ole Miss. I'm saying these players have ties and things like that to where Ole Miss is probably going to look at them. And that's two players that are currently in the portal and one player that, as of recording, is not in the portal. And the rumor is that he will be going to the NFL draft, but that's not as set in stone as we think it is as well. But we'll start out with Roydell Williams. He was essentially the backup running back at Alabama this season. He had 111 carries, 560 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Now, whenever you ask an Alabama player about Roydell Williams, they will tell you how hard this running back goes. So there's a lot of hard running backs that we're going to be bringing up in this transfer portal segment. A lot of people that can do these things that Snoop Connor did. That seems to be the back that Ole Miss is recruiting out of the transfer portal. And we'll talk about the ones that are coming back in the next segment as well. Roydell Williams, 111 carries, 560 yards, and 5 touchdowns, predominantly backing up Jase McClellan this season. Roydell has visited this weekend, I believe, Florida State. If he doesn't commit soon, you might see him take a visit to Ole Miss. It's really interesting and really fluid, but this is the type player that is of the profile that Ole Miss would be interested in. And there's a relationship with Pete Golding. There's a relationship with other players that they have gone on. I mean, Lane Kiffin would do wonders with a back like Roydell Williams. Now, the second running back that I'm honestly very impressed with potentially is Logan Diggs. He was the running back that transferred to LSU this year, ended up with 119 carries, 653 yards, and 7 touchdowns. That's nearly 6 yards per carry for this running back out of Butte, Louisiana. So he is from the boot, so to speak. But last season, he took 2 visits that I can remember. He went to Ole Miss, he went to LSU to visit, ended up committing to LSU because kids from Louisiana commit to LSU usually whenever they can. So now, if you go by my rule that it's important to be in the top 2 in the age of the transfer portal, I think this kid needs to be a name to watch at running back as well. He is a plus Snoop Connor type running back. If you look at what Ole Miss has on their roster, and we're going to talk about in the next segment, a plus Snoop Connor that they're recruiting is kind of a big deal. I think you're going to see Ole Miss's offense return to what it was in 2020 and 2021, running the ball by committee. It's not just going to be a bell cow bat. Quinshon Judkins is potentially the best running back in all of college football. You're not going to find another running back that can do everything that Quinshon Judkins can do running the football. But you might be able to find 1 or 2 running backs that can provide the same level of production that he did in 2023, because that's honestly what Ole Miss is trying to do. You've seen all the Moneyball gifts that Lane Kiffin has put out over the last couple of months. Well, this is an example of that. You have to find 3 running backs that can give you 2,600 yards rushing, 29 touchdowns, over 322 carries. That is what you have to do. And Logan Diggs fits this to a T. Really, really good running back as well. Now, the third back is interesting. This running back's not even in the transfer portal right now. It's just madly rumored that he is not coming back to Alabama next season, and it's currently rumored that he is going to go to the NFL. Now, this is what it means that it might be a little bit differently. Will Ole Miss's collective, will the Grove collective offer them enough, and will he get in the transfer portal to find out about that, enough to offset 1 year getting paid for his first contract? Because this is what's at stake for Jase McClellan. This is a really good running back, and everybody saw that with Alabama this year. He was kind of the bell cow of that offense. I mean, everybody talks about Jalen Milroe, but Alabama football really honestly went as Jase McClellan went. Will you have a situation where the collective, where you can offer enough to offset a year and give him the opportunity? It's like, hey, you're projected as a 4th round or a 5th round running back in year 1. And the NFL doesn't notoriously pay for running backs. What if we told you can come here for 1 year and you might come out a 2nd or a 3rd round level running back, to where that first contract is up a little bit higher? I think that is what Ole Miss can offer, because we've proven over the last 2 years that they'll feed you. They'll let you be the guy and let you put up massive amounts of numbers that could get you drafted at a higher level than you could before. And running backs in Lane Kiffin's system has done extremely well. Look at his track record. Everywhere he has been, Ole Miss had 2 running backs from 2020 and 21 go from basically unrated to get practice squads and on teams. They get into the league. They had no business getting there, but they did. You obviously, you know what Quinshon is going to do. But before that, Devin Singletary, with him at FAU, he's still playing with Houston Texans. Before that, Derrick Henry, he recruited, I can't remember his name, the running back at Pittsburgh. Running back after running back has been successful playing under Lane Kiffin. So it might be beneficial for a running back like Jase McClellan to come in for 1 year, improve his draft stock by a couple of rounds, and go into the league. Now, The league going into the rumor broke on Saturday night. I think Zach Berry from On 3 said that there was a chance that they were reporting in Tuscaloosa that he could go to the NFL. On Sunday, this tweet dropped, and it was Lane Kiffin tweeting transfer to the SIP, then on to the NFL. That tells me this isn't as much of a sure thing as everybody thinks it is. And Ole Miss is still a little bit in this. Now, it might happen a little bit later on today that he's going to the league. He could drop the whole 9 yards. I get that. But this tweet makes me think that it's a little bit different moving forward for Ole Miss football and how they might be more in it if Jase McClellan in his future plans than we even know about. Should be really interesting indeed. So, the transfer portal really offers a type. If you think that Snoop Connor type running back, these are 3 backs that could fill that role quite nicely. Now, where do you get the other 2 types of back? Because Ole Miss in 2020 and 2021 had 3 different types of running backs that all could have a day where they beat you. Well, we'll tell you what those backs might be as well as soon as we come back. I do want to let you know, thanks again for making Locked On your first listen of the day. We're just getting started. The portal isn't the only option for Ole Miss football because they have some pieces in-house, and that needs to be talked about too as well. And we will talk about that right after this. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you place that $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet, like same game parlays, and you can find bets in the new Explore tab, or maybe make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, which is like the best way to find popular parlays. And they also have many, many, many more. So visit fanduel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, it's an official partner of the NFL. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube today and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, so we talked about the transfer portal and avenues that Ole Miss likely could go down over the next couple of weeks. 3 players that are unbelievably good, and honestly, with Ole Miss and their prognostications going into 2024, kind of makes a little bit of sense. There's even a couple of pie in the sky type stuff to where, hey, can you convince this kid to not go to the NFL and play for your team? So really interesting stuff, but there's also avenues inside the program. Now, we've talked for 6 months about Ole Miss having a type inside their program, and they absolutely do. And we'll get to that in just a second. But one of the first players that we want to talk about is Ulysses Bentley IV. And he has already accepted an invite to the Hula Bowl, but that was before all this Quinshon stuff started. Last year, Ulysses Bentley had 95 carries for 540 yards and 4 touchdowns. An explosive player. Ole Miss likely doesn't have the run they had against Georgia Tech. They don't beat Arkansas potentially. Ulysses Bentley was a bell cow type running back, and the number of carries, I have to think the number of carries he had was dwindled because of what Quinshon demanded. And he ended up with 278 carries or something like that. But 95 carries, that was nearly all the carries of the offense, was because of the number of carries that Quinshon took. Quinshon had nearly half of the carries in Ole Miss's rushing offense in 2023. Just not enough for it to go down, especially when we're used to seeing what was happening with Snoop Connor and Henry Parrish and Jerry and Ely. It was weird to see one player get half of the reps. And this is including Jackson Dart running the ball. all of that. So it ended up with Ulysses Bentley not getting as much as he needed. And if you look at this rate, if he'd have gotten 200 carries on the season, he would have gone over 1,000 yards. He was a much more effective yards per carry running back last season as well. Now, a lot of that was everybody was concentrating on Quinshon, and I get that. But Ulysses Bentley had a really explosive year. Now, the question becomes, does he come back? Is there a chance he lines up in a Rebel uniform next season? Because he has already committed to the Hula Bowl, but that's not binding. He hasn't signed anything to go back to school or anything like that, or go to the NFL. But Ulysses Bentley could see this as like, hey, I can come back and be the dude. And let's just be real about something. Ulysses Bentley as the top running back and that kind of speed could make this offense unbelievably explosive this season. There's a lot of upside for Ulysses Bentley IV to return. Now, I'm not saying he will. I'm saying there's a lot of upside for it to happen. And Ole Miss recruiting players that fit a mold similar to Snoop Connor tells me that there's probably a good chance at Ulysses Bentley coming back and running it back to get 150 carries. Not so many carries that it knocks a ton of tread off the tires, but enough carries to where he can feature, and he puts up 750, 800 yards rushing next season with another running back that does similar and a third running back that could be dominant as well. And that third running back is Kedrick Reescano. Let's look at the highlights real quick. Kedrick Reescano, first off, that you will notice is great vision and great contact balance. He's a hard guy to get on the ground. Actually, a lot of the stuff that made Ole Miss fans really like Quinshon Judkins, you have a similar situation with Kedrick Reescano. And Kedrick Reescano had the benefit, honestly, that Quinshon Judkins didn't have. Kedrick Reescano didn't have to come in and play. All of the growing pains that can be happening in pass pro and things like that, you didn't have to worry about that situation. He could sit there and learn. He can sit there and be ready for whenever his number's called because of the depth that had been developed in front of him. If you look at him, so much vision. He's so good at finding open space. His contact balance is completely off the charts. His feet are outstanding. And this is a player that was committed to Michigan State for most of the 2023 recruiting cycle, then at the end ended up going to Ole Miss as well. Really, really good football player, and I don't think anybody should overstate that at all. I'm a huge fan of Kedrick Reescano. I have been. I know the staff loves Kedrick Reescano. I think it was just a situation for his lack of playing time in 2023 is, well, half the carries were going to Quinshon, and you had to feed Ulysses Bentley, which you did a little bit, but that was roughly all of the carries. After that, you had the stuff that Jackson Dart got whenever he ran the football, and it was mop-up time with a player like Matt Jones, who's honestly a pretty good running back himself. So it'll be interesting to see in this spring football how Kedrick Reescano is going to react, because we have an interesting situation with the transfer portal. I think Ole Miss is going to go after one of those three names that I talked about. They might not, but I think they will. They're going to at least try. I think Kedrick Reescano has a chance to take a major, major step forward. And then you have the explosivity factor of Ulysses Bentley IV. And you have a situation where Ole Miss's offense potentially could be more explosive than it was in 2023. And that is without the potentially best running back in college football. Because remember, it's not about replacing the best running back in college football. It's about getting to 2,600 yards rushing. And how you do that is going to determine how this offense looks. And this offense, going back to what it was with Matt Corral in 2021, throwing the football, Matt Corral in 2020 is going to be an important piece, because I do think this offense is going to be very Jackson Dart centric in 2021. It just is. You have potentially who is going to be the most beloved player in your program history, if he has the type of year that I think he's going to have, he's going to be the guy. He just is. So you need to find that 2,600 yards. You need to find those 29 touchdowns to replace. And if you can do that, it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be everything that you thought this season could be. And with the weapons you have out at wide receiver and at tight end and those positions, it's going to be interesting. Really, really interesting stuff. And we're going to talk more about the transfer portal as the week goes on. There's an offensive lineman that visited this weekend. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the week as well. But still to come on Locked On Ole Miss, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Ole Miss's men's basketball team got popped a little bit in Thompson-Boling Arena, Food City Center, whatever it's called, taking a 26-point loss. And I will tell you why that loss is going to be a good thing for this Ole Miss basketball team. I know we come to sports to escape from some crazy realities of real life, but can we just talk a minute about real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. It's kind of scary stuff, honestly. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if my wife or somebody else got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from getting the life-saving medication they need. And honestly, I wouldn't lose my mind for that. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, and others. This stuff can happen to any of us. So visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It'll be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medication will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. So go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, to get $20 off your order. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Be part of history. So let's change gears just a little bit. And before we get out of the show today, let's talk about the basketball game a little bit that happened on Saturday. And Ole Miss got popped by the Tennessee Volunteers, the number 5 ranked Tennessee Volunteers in the Thompson-Boling Arena, or the Food City Center, or whatever it's being called now. I guess it's kind of like Twitter and X and all of that stuff. But I could honestly just sit and watch Tennessee Volunteers play defense over and over again. And I was sitting here watching the game with Tennessee fans that were like, yeah, this has been basically the same Tennessee basketball team for 3 or 4 years. So that you have a major upperclassman team that's honestly pretty good. They're ranked 5th in the country, and they play defense like banshees. This was a game that everybody knew going into it, there was a chance that Ole Miss could get popped a little bit. Because while I think Ole Miss is good, and I think Ole Miss is an NCAA tournament team, I don't think Ole Miss is an SEC championship contender. I don't think Ole Miss is a national championship contender in basketball. So what we need to look at in this situation is Ole Miss needed to get popped. And I know nobody wants to lose a basketball game, and that kind of defeats the purpose. But if you look at taking a loss to make yourself better down the road, I think that is a situation where this happened a little bit. I think Ole Miss will be better against Florida Wednesday night for winning the game, or for losing the way they did against Tennessee. I think practices are going to be rough. And we'll talk to Tim Thomas a little bit later on the week. And me and Tim talked about how getting popped could be beneficial for this Ole Miss team towards the end of the season. Nobody expected this Ole Miss team to be undefeated, and their last loss being by Kermit Davis in the SEC tournament. So the confidence that has gone up we were teetering on the overconfidence era. And Chris Beard to talk about during the season that this team has kind of been robbing banks and kind of getting away with some stuff. And they don't want the team to take plays off. And Chris Beard talked about how this Tennessee team doesn't take plays off. And honestly, if you look at it, what Tennessee was Saturday night is probably the goal of what Chris Beard wants Ole Miss to be in year one or year two, like the early parts of the build. So while Ole Miss fans, nobody wanted Ole Miss to get beat by that, and nobody wanted the game to look like it did, ultimately, I think this is a situation to where Ole Miss takes a strategic retreat, takes a loss to get better down the road. I do think there's a situation to where Ole Miss beats Mississippi State, or Ole Miss beats South Carolina, or Ole Miss beats Georgia, or a team like that. I don't know the schedule coming up, so I could have the opponents wrong. But they win a game like that because of what happened in the Food City Center Saturday night. I have nothing but respect for what Chris Beard is doing as a program and Ole Miss basketball moving forward. And if Ole Miss goes 9-9 in the SEC, I think 9-9 should be the goal. Ole Miss is going to drop some games, but if they go 9-9, that is 22-9 in year one and like an 8 seeded in the NCAA tournament. And that is a year one that you can be proud of from Chris Beard. I think that's the goal. Some good basketball teams in the SEC, and believe me, Ole Miss is going to get one of them. I don't know who it is. They're going to get one of them. This isn't a situation to where teams are fraudulently doing whatever they're doing. This is just a situation where Ole Miss went to the number 5 team in the country in their building and played them in a game where they were 100% up. This Tennessee team has lost to Purdue and North Carolina and Kansas. I think that's their 3 losses or something like that. So know that Ole Miss was going into a difficult environment. And I think that it's going to help Ole Miss as the season goes on if they let it. If they let that happen, they will be all right. So should be pretty good indeed. And I'm pretty excited to see exactly where Chris Beard can take this Ole Miss team and get them ready for the Florida Gators on Wednesday night. I want to see the bounce back now. We do not have a proof of concept of what a Chris Beard team looks like coming off of a loss. And after that game, my expectation is the basketball team is going to come out with their hair on fire on Wednesday and play really, really well. That is my expectation for this basketball team. And there's nothing that can tell me otherwise. But we still have yet to see that because Saturday night is the first game that Ole Miss has lost under Chris Beard. So we'll see. The Florida Gators playing the Ole Miss Rebels on Wednesday night. We'll have Tim Thomas on Thursday night talking about the Ole Miss Tennessee game and the Florida game as well. We wanted both games of the week to be played before Tim came on the show as well. So it should be pretty cool indeed. I do want to thank everybody for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen. Every dayers, we continue to turn our attention to the portal and SEC hoops, and will Ole Miss and Chris Beard rebound from taking a bad night in Tennessee? For your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports streaming channel. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Hotty toddy.